So we have a school project where we have to make a Mac Pro killer machine. The idea is it's a machine that is way better than Mac Pro that matches that 10,000 Canadian dollar price point. And I quite like mine, so I'm posting on YouTube. Some people did do gimmicks where they made way cheaper options, but I max it out and I buy a whole bunch of pointless things. So if you ever wanted to build a Mac Pro killer, then this is how you do it. And all the prices are in Canadian, so sorry about that in advance. Alright, let's talk a bit about my Mac Pro killer, right? And this is a very, very good device that I made. And the Mac Pro is also a great device. It comes in at $10,000 Canadian, so actually slightly more than that. And I made a device that is under $10,000 that completely smokes it. So let's just go over what I made. So the first thing is the heart of the system, right? This is your CPU, and this is how everything runs, right? Everything goes to the CPU, and the CPU decides what to do with it. And it's one of the most important parts of the system, if not the most important part. So Apple's Mac Pro uses the M2 Ultra. This chip has 24 cores and a 3.6 gigahertz clock speed. To verse that, I chose the Core Ultra 9 from Intel. It also has 24 cores, but it has a clock speed of 5.7 gigahertz, which is way higher than the 3.6 gigahertz found on the M2 Ultra. I could have chosen a cheaper option, which could have been better for gaming, for example, with AMD's X3D lineup, or I could have gone with the i9 14th gen, but I really like this pick as it allowed for much higher core clocks and just overall a better CPU. Next is the visual powerhouse. So the Mac, the M2 Ultra chip, has this special little GPU and it has 76 cores. That's because we got the upgraded version. The original version has 60 cores and it all comes in at a 3.6 gigahertz clock speed, as this is what the CPU is set at as well. To verse it, I chose the ROG Strix OC RTX 4090. This is a slightly overclocked RTX 4090, and the RTX 4090 is not the best right now, right? The 5090 would have been a better option, but stats are quite important, so I decided to have this one as there's way more stats available. It has 16,384 CUDA cores, which are actually incomparable to the 76 cores on the M2 Ultra, but trust me, that's a pretty high number. And there's a clock speed of 2.235 gigahertz. Looking at the mind of the system, which is the RAM, the Mac Pro's M2 Ultra has what's called integrated or unified memory. Sometimes it's called integrated memory, and it is right beside the chip, and it makes it super, super fast. As you can see, it is 800 gigabytes per second. But it only comes in at a size of 64 gigabytes. So to try and beat that, I chose the G.Skill Trident Z RGB 96 gigabyte sticks of RAM. So this is two 48 gigabyte sticks of RAM, and then the idea is that you just put together 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that will get you to 192 gigabytes. So I have to buy two of these kits, but it's DDR5, which is super fast, and it's 6400 mega transfers, and it comes in at CL32. So this is really top line RAM. Next is the saver of the system, and that's the Mac Pro's M2 Ultra. So the SSD, which is obviously what it uses, is 1 terabyte. And it's an okay SSD, coming in at 5,455 megabytes per second as its read speed, and its write speed being 5,100 megabytes per second. Samsung has their 990 Pro, and this is a really, really good SSD, and I chose to use that. I bought 3 of them, and each of them is 4 terabytes. So each one is 4 times bigger than the Max, and I got 3 of them. So it's 12 times bigger. And read speed and write speed is also very, very good here. You get a 7,450 megabyte per second read speed and a 6,900 megabyte per second write speed. Next is the FortiStar hardware, and this is where all of your stuff is stored. So the Mac Pro has this cheese grater case, and it uses 2 USB-C ports. To verse this, I chose the NZXT H9 Flow. This has 2 USB-A ports, 1 USB-C port, and 1 3.5mm headphone jack. Some other options that you can think about when you want to buy a case is the MCPRUE. So MCPRUE Apollo X, and this has 2 USB-C ports as well, but it's 1,000 USD, and it's mainly just to look very similar to the Mac Pro. So if you want a Mac Pro looking device, this is an option. The other option that I really liked is a very popular case. This is the Hyte Y70 Touch. This is the Infinite version because the original got discontinued. So it has 2 USB-As, 1 USB-C, 1 3.5mm headphone jack. But if you look up front, you see a screen. This is a 2.7K resolution, 14-inch touchscreen, and this makes it so nice to use. And the original Hyte Y70 Touch actually had a 4K touchscreen, but sadly that's discontinued. So let's talk about the backbone of the system, how everything runs, and that's the motherboard. Right, the Mac Pro has 6 USB-Cs, 2 USB-As, 2 10GB Ethernet, 2 HDMIs, 1 3.5mm, and Wi-Fi 6E. So to beat this, I chose the MSI MPG Z890 Carbon Wi-Fi gaming motherboard. A mouthful to say, but it is really good. It has 10 USB-As, 3 USB-Cs, 1 2.5GB and 1 5GB Ethernet, 1 HDMI, 2 3.5mm headphone jacks, and Wi-Fi 7. So you get more headphone jacks, better Wi-Fi. You do get less HDMIs, but I'll talk about that later. And your Ethernet is a bit worse, which I'll talk about later, but you get better USB-As, and you don't have as much USB-Cs, but again, we'll try and fix that later. Next is what I like to call the connecting champion. And this is just to help me get up to that point of the USB-Cs. And this is a PCIe Gen 3 by 2 USB-C. So there's 4 USB 3.2 ports, and then it's all just kind of slotted in, and this will help me get the USB-C number to match. Next is this TP-Link 10GB PCIe network card. This is to match with the 10GB on the Mac Pro, as we do not have 10GB Ethernet, so if you want that, you can also pick up this to add in. So let's do a little port roundup and how all the ports add up. So the Mac Pro gets 2 more USB-C ports from its case, coming in with 8 USB-Cs, 2 USB-As, 2 10GB Ethernet, 2 HDMIs, and 1 3.5mm headphone jack. But with the motherboard and all the stuff here, you get 10 USB-As, 8 USB-Cs. So you get more USB-As, 8 more USB-As. You match the USB-Cs. You get 1 2.5GB Ethernet, 1 10GB Ethernet, and 1 5GB Ethernet. So the Ethernet is worse, but as long as you're only using one, it's fine. And honestly, you don't need 10GB Ethernet. You also get 2 HDMIs because one comes from the RTX 4090 that I explained earlier. You get 3 display ports, which the Mac Pro doesn't even have display ports. And you get 2 3.5mm headphone and audio jacks. So let's talk about what I like to call the Arctic Guardian. And this is the cooler. The cooler is key to your components, as you need to keep it cool. So this is a CPU cooler, and I could have gone with a water cooling build, but I'll explain a bit later why I didn't. So the Mac Pro has this air cooler that really isn't that great, and there's very little listed specs on this, so that's an image from iFixit. I chose to use the Arctic Liquid Freezer 360 degree AIO with 3 120mm fans. This is a liquid AIO cooler, and it's basically a lame version of water cooling, as it's much simpler to do, but it's also much cheaper and much easier for somebody to actually do. So I could have water cooled this system, but I chose this instead. And this should definitely beat out the air cooler on the Mac Pro. So let's talk about the spark of life. That's the power supply. So on the Mac Pro, you get a 1180 watt power supply, and that's what it looks like. You can see it on screen right now. So to compete with this, I chose the Be Quiet Pure Power 12M. This is a 1200 watt power supply, and it's really not that good. At least it's modular, which will allow for easier changing out of stuff. But I don't think it's that great, as 1200 watts won't allow for much upgradability past your 4090. But hey, it is good enough, and I need to save money for a super big item that comes up later on. So here's that super big item. I didn't realize it so soon. This is the Viewing Titan. It is the Samsung Odyssey G8. This is a 34-inch 4K 240Hz OLED monitor. This is $1,500. It's the second most expensive thing on this list, just behind the RTX 4090. It has 1 mini DisplayPort, 1 mini HDMI, and two USB-Cs. So if you want to game, this is the top line monitor. 240Hz is quadruple the speed of most regular monitors, double the speed of most cheaper gaming monitors. The resolution is quadruple of what people normally use to game on, and it's OLED, which almost nobody has, and this is a really, really good monitor. It's super expensive, and a lot of money is sunk here. Let's talk about the mouse. And so the Mac Pro has this magic mouse. It is wireless, it is 100 grams, it is lightning rechargeable on the bottom, and it only has one button, and no scroll wheel, and is super non-ergonomic. To beat it, I chose my mouse, the Attack Shark X3. So this mouse is really, really good. It is wireless, it is 49 grams, so less than half of the weight. USB-C rechargeable, which is nicer than lightning rechargeable, as it's much more available. And it's at the front, not on the bottom. It uses a PAW3395 sensor, a flagship sensor from last year, making it really, really nice. And this is one of the most precise mice under $100. It has 5 buttons and a scroll wheel. So that's 2 right here, the 2 front buttons up at the front. Clicking this in, the scroll wheel, and you have a scroll wheel, obviously, as I brought up earlier. And you have a 2.4 gigahertz toggle. And this is ergonomic, as opposed to Magic Mouse. Next is the keyboard. So the Mac Pro has this magic keyboard. It comes with Touch ID. It's an 100% keyboard. Uses a scissor switch mechanism, which is kind of half membrane, half mechanical, but it's wireless. To beat it, I chose my keyboard. And you can see that I'm going for a very purpley aesthetic. So you can see that they really line up nicely together. This is mechanical, so proper mechanical. It is 75% build. It is wireless. It is hot swappable. So that means that you can change out the switches if you do not like the switches. It has a volume wheel up here, and it even has a screen on it. So it is a really, really good keyboard. Let's talk about our speaker selection. So the Mac Pro has a speaker built in, and there's very, very, very little information on this. No teardowns actually go over this. So I just put a picture of a speaker. It's just a regular speaker thing on. And to beat this, I chose the Yamaha HS5. These are top-of-the-line studio speakers, and they are a bit more budget than something like the Yamaha HS8s, but hey, it is still a really good option. The Yamaha HS5s come in about $270, and 2 of them cost you about $550. But it is a really nice studio monitor speaker to use, so awesome choice in my opinion. We need to buy a Windows license, so add that to the total. And it's really close to $10,000. I could spend more, I could buy extra keyboards. I love keyboards, but really not much need. So let's just stop here. And if you want cheaper Windows licenses, you can from places like KeysFan. They do give you better Windows licenses. And if I were to actually do this build and I had $10,000, I would buy a slightly better power supply, but I ain't wasting my time getting another power supply. So peace out, see you later.